These Are the Times We Live In, by the Pakistani-born British poet Imtiaz Dharker, appeared in her 2006 collection, The Terrorist at My Table. In it, she explores themes of identity, displacement, and the quiet violence of systemic suspicion in a post-9/11 world. The collection confronts how fear, particularly around terrorism, breeds prejudice, surveillance, and dehumanization. Dharker examines how people are reduced to data, judged by appearance or background, and caught in bureaucratic systems beyond their control. She also addresses the politicization of women's bodies and the silencing of marginalized voices. With a blend of irony, surreal imagery, and emotional restraint, Dharker challenges readers to reconsider who gets to belong, and at what cost. In the poem, the speaker invites the reader to experience border security from the perspective of a person who is marginalised because of their race, name, or perceived origin. The poem describes a traveller going through passport control, where an official examines their documents and looks at them with suspicion. As the encounter unfolds, the speaker imagines the official making assumptions based on their name and appearance. The situation becomes increasingly surreal, with imagined changes to the traveller's face and body, until they no longer seem to match their own photograph. In the final image, the traveller's identity appears to fragment completely, with part of their face drifting onto a newspaper page. The encounter ends not with resolution, but with quiet disintegration. The poem comprises 10 stanzas of varying lengths. It is written in free verse, which means that it has neither a fixed metrical or rhythmic structure nor a set rhyme scheme. The structure of the poem instead mirrors the traveller's emotional journey through border control. At first, the stanzas gradually build in length, from 3 lines to 5 to 11, reflecting the steady intensification of the experience. The narrative and emotional pressure mount as the traveller is reduced, scrutinised, and reshaped. However, from that midpoint onward, the structure begins to fragment. The stanzas break down into smaller units. 3 lines, then 5, then a couple of 3-line stanzas, finally ending with a 2-line, a 3-line, and a single-line stanza. This visual and rhythmic disintegration echoes the traveller's own psychological unravelling. As their identity is chipped away, so too is the coherence of the poem's form. In a powerful example of form reinforcing meaning, the breakdown in structure enacts the breakdown of the self. By using the second person and the present tense, Dharker pulls the reader directly into the scene, whether they like it or not. You're not watching this happen to someone else. It's happening to you. You're the one handing over your passport, being judged and mistrusted. This is especially confronting for readers who, perhaps due to race, nationality, or name, have never experienced this kind of suspicion. For them, the idea of being seen as a threat based on appearance alone may feel unsettling or even implausible, and this creates a kind of forced empathy. Rather than asking for sympathy, the poem demands that the reader acknowledge what this kind of everyday suspicion feels like, and how absurd it is that this treatment has become normal in the times we live in. Not only does the second person strip away distance and control, mirroring the lack of agency experienced by the figure in the poem, but it also creates an unstable narrative voice. Simultaneously the speaker and yet not the speaker, the reader and yet not the reader. This blurring in form contributes to the poem's central idea, that identity, when filtered through systems of power and prejudice, becomes fractured. As the narrative voice breaks apart, so does the self. The poem begins with a short, declarative sentence. You hand over your passport. It sounds routine, something thousands of people do every day without incident. But that illusion of normality is quickly disrupted. It's the moment that he looks at your face that everything changes. It's not the passport that causes suspicion, it's your face. That quiet shift points to racial profiling. Imtiaz Dharker, who was born in Pakistan and raised in Britain, is clearly drawing on personal or observed experience, i.e. the idea that a British passport doesn't protect you from suspicion if your skin is the wrong colour. The phrase reading you backwards from the last page works on multiple levels. On a literal level, it refers to the passport itself. The photo and data are at the back. But figuratively, it's about prejudice. This official is starting with an ending he's already decided, as if he's flipping to the final page of a novel and assuming he knows the plot. And reading something backwards rarely makes sense. It suggests distortion, misunderstanding, and injustice. We might also read this as a reference to assumptions about otherness. Arabic and Urdu, for example, are read from right to left. Perhaps a subtle nod to cultural difference being seen as suspicious in itself. The second stanza continues. You could be offended, but in the end you decide it makes as much sense as anything else, given the times we live in. Note how the individual's first emotional reaction is somewhat muted. She doesn't protest, complain, or get angry. Offence is mentioned as a possibility, not an action. That phrase, you could be, is conditional, and it is quickly dismissed. The speaker decides not to be offended because, in a world this absurd, what's the point? There's a tone of weary resignation. This kind of treatment, being viewed with suspicion, having your identity doubted, is unfair. But it's also become so normalised that it's almost not worth reacting to. She sums it up somewhat wryly. It makes as much sense as anything else, given the times we live in. The fact that she doesn't stand up for herself shows the deeper damage. There's a sense that protesting would be pointless, or maybe even dangerous. The injustice has become so embedded in the system that it feels safer to just let it happen. This isn't just about one man or one moment. It's about the zeitgeist, the spirit of the age. The traveller isn't blaming the individual officer. She's recognising that he's part of a wider, broken system. The third stanza continues. You shrink to the size of the book in his hand. This powerful metaphor conveys how the speaker's whole identity, their life, their complexity, their humanity, is reduced to a small, impersonal booklet of data. They've been flattened into official facts, a name, a photograph, a date and place of birth, which are treated with suspicion. The verb shrink suggests not just physical smallness, but emotional smallness too. It implies humiliation, fear, even shame, though the speaker has done nothing wrong. There's a real sense of being diminished in front of authority. You can see his mind working. Keep an eye on that name. These lines are chilling in their predictability. The individual knows exactly what the official is thinking. There's no spoken accusation, just silent judgement, and it's entirely based on superficial details. The phrase "keep an eye on" immediately suggests surveillance, suspicion, and control. A quiet but constant monitoring of someone presumed to be a threat. What's especially disturbing is that the scrutiny is no longer directed at the person, but at their name. The traveller has been reduced to a single piece of information, likely one that marks them out as foreign or non-Western, and that fragment becomes the entire basis for suspicion. The customs official is putting 2 and 2 together and coming up with 5. It contains a Z, and it just moved house. This is where the poem reveals how everyday, innocent facts, a name with a Z, a change of address, become grounds for suspicion, and systems can turn ordinary behaviour into something threatening, simply because of someone's perceived foreignness. The Z is a small but significant detail. There are only a small handful of Anglo names that contain it, e.g. Elizabeth, Zoe, etc. So here it becomes shorthand for being other, for not quite belonging, despite having a British passport. There's a quiet irony in the idea that your name, something you didn't choose, has become a reason to be watched. The dehumanisation and the surreal nature of the encounter intensifies with the phrase, "it just moved house." The use of it rather than you is striking. The subject is no longer even a person, but a thing. And the thing in question is not even the individual, but the name. This language choice is cold and clinical. That name is now treated as a suspicious object that has changed location. A fact, incidentally, which would not be recorded on a passport. The individual has been so entirely reduced that even their movements are attributed to their name, not to them as a human being. This subtle grammatical shift strips away agency and identity, reinforcing how easily systems can other and objectify. The poem now becomes not just slightly surreal, but completely absurd. The birthmark shifted recently to another arm or leg. A birthmark can't move, and even if it could, it's not something that would be recorded in a passport. This irrationality mirrors the logic of paranoia. Once someone is deemed suspicious, anything can be interpreted as further evidence. The lines, "nothing is quite the same as it should be," reinforce that sense of dislocation. The modal verb should is particularly loaded. It implies a fixed standard of what someone ought to look like or ought to be. But who sets that standard? It exposes how those in power decide what is normal, and anyone who doesn't fit neatly into it is treated as suspicious. There's also a subtle but important shift in tone here, from observation to quiet menace. If even your body is unstable, if even your physical identity is unreliable, what's left? Taken together, these lines suggest that proof of innocence is impossible when suspicion is based on appearance, background, or name. The speaker is being judged by an ever-shifting and irrational standard. This is what makes the poem quietly terrifying. The stanza concludes with a resigned tone. But what do you expect? It's a sign of the times we live in. This rhetorical question captures a mood of tired inevitability. It implies, of course this is happening. Why would you expect anything different? There's no outrage, no surprise, just weary acceptance. The injustice has become so ordinary that it's almost stopped being questioned. These lines can also echo a common phrase, "It's just the way things are," which makes the injustice feel normalised. That's exactly the point. The speaker is holding a world where absurdity and racism have been woven into the fabric of everyday life to account. This is the second time we hear the phrase, "the times we live in," and the repetition gives it weight. It acts almost like a chorus or refrain, drawing attention to the fact that this isn't an isolated incident. It's systemic, it's cultural, and it's the norm. This second time, however, it sounds more bitter. What began as an observation has now become an indictment. The fourth stanza continues. In front of you, he flicks to the photograph and looks at you suspiciously. The verb flicks evokes a quick, careless, almost disrespectful action. There's no care taken with the document or the person it represents. The action feels dismissive, contemptuous, and passive-aggressive. The repeated fricative f sounds in the alliterated front, flicks, and photograph mimic the soft, dry sound of paper being turned. But there's something slightly sharp and aggressive in the sound too. It contributes to the tension of the moment, which is quiet but hostile. The line "looks at you suspiciously" confirms that distrust is the default. He's not trying to verify your identity. He's looking for evidence that it's false. His gaze isn't neutral, but is already tainted by assumption. In the fifth stanza, Dharker explores the traveller's reaction to the customs official's behaviour. That's when you really have to laugh. This is not joyful laughter, however. It's bitter, hollow, and defensive. It's the kind of laugh that masks frustration, humiliation, or helplessness. The speaker is laughing not with the situation, but at its absurdity. It's a coping mechanism, because if she doesn't laugh, she might break. The lines that follow plunge fully into the realms of the surreal. While you were flying up in the air, they changed your chin and redid your hair. This evokes a bizarre, Kafkaesque scenario in which her appearance has somehow changed mid-flight, as if she has undergone plastic surgery in the sky. It's a brilliant satire of the lengths to which authorities will go to question someone's identity. Of course, nothing has changed, but the traveller is being treated as if she has. This highlights how rigid and suspicious the system is. If the photograph doesn't match perfectly, it's the person who must be wrong, not the document. The rhyme between air and hair is the first notable rhyme in the poem, and it stands out. It lends the moment a sing-song, almost mocking quality, which mirrors the absurdity being described. It also gives the tone a faint whiff of nursery rhyme, which only makes the scenario seem more ridiculous and unsettling. It reminds us how childish and flimsy the suspicions really are. The sixth stanza continues. They scrubbed out your mouth and rubbed out your eyes. They made you over completely. The image of the traveller's photograph on her passport is now being used as a metaphor. The verb scrubbed out is abrasive and aggressive. It doesn't just mean remove, it implies force, effort, even punishment. The speaker's mouth being scrubbed out suggests more than just a change in appearance. It evokes the way in which she has been effectively silenced through the removal of her voice, her agency and her power. She cannot speak up. She cannot protest. She has to endure it all in silence. The line "rubbed out your eyes" deepens the dehumanization. There's a haunting quality here. Eyes are often seen as the most expressive part of the face, the so-called windows to the soul. Erasing them isn't just a physical act, it's symbolic. It's a stripping away of identity, personality, and humanity. This is no longer a bureaucratic inconvenience. It's soul-destroying. The phrase "they made you over completely" sounds almost upbeat at first, like something from a makeover show or fashion magazine. But here it drips with irony. A makeover is usually something you choose to do to boost your confidence or express yourself. In this context, however, the makeover is imposed, and it's othering rather than enhancing. The result is not empowerment, but alienation and enforced identity. The ambiguity of "they" is important. It's never clarified who they are, which makes them seem to be both everywhere and nowhere. It could be airport security, the government, the media, the public. The entire apparatus that treats people with suspicion based on race, name, or appearance. This vague, faceless "they" reinforces the idea that the prejudice is systemic rather than down to the individual. The final stanzas deal with the aftermath and the emotional fallout of this encounter, and all that's left is his look of surprise. This line signals just how much has been stripped away. The speaker's identity, voice, and even her face, symbolically at least, have been erased. What remains is his reaction, a moment of bafflement that's almost insulting in its absurdity. It's as if he's surprised by a mismatch that he himself has invented. It is perhaps also an indication that this discrimination works at an almost subliminal level. The line "because you don't match your photograph" is rich with irony. Objectively, the traveller clearly matches her photograph. She hasn't changed, but he sees a discrepancy because his judgement is clouded by suspicion. His look of surprise is not based on truth, but on the paranoid logic he's been trained to apply. The line exposes the absurdity of treating someone's physical identity as suspicious because of unconscious bias. The line "even that is coming apart" pushes the metaphor further. It's no longer just a case of a mistaken photograph, it's the very concept of identity that's being dismantled. The idea of a fixed self, one that can be documented, verified, trusted, is dissolving under the weight of systemic suspicion. This metaphorical coming apart shows the psychological impact of being seen as a threat rather than as a person. The speaker's identity isn't just being questioned. In a sense, it's being unmade. Note the understated tone here. Dharker doesn't shout or rage. Instead, she calmly reveals how damaging this experience is, letting the reader feel for themselves the slow erosion of self. The next stanza is one of the most quietly heartbreaking ones in the poem. The pieces are there, but they missed out your heart. Note the fragmentation of the traveller's identity here. The pieces are there. This line acknowledges that on paper everything should add up. The name, the photograph, the passport. The speaker is recognisably herself. All the pieces of her identity are technically present, yet something vital is missing. But they missed out your heart. This is the emotional climax of the poem. The heart represents not just feeling, but humanity, soul, and personhood. The system, the they, has reduced the speaker to surface-level data, treating her as a set of suspicious details rather than a full human being. They have overlooked her humanity. She has been objectified, dissected, and reconstructed in their eyes, but never recognised as a person with inner life, dignity, or emotion. The poem continues. Half your face splits away, drifts onto the page of a newspaper that's dated today. This line continues the theme of disintegration. The speaker is no longer a whole person. Only fragments remain. This splitting is metaphorical. Her identity is being torn apart, and there's no control over it. She's not even being attacked directly. It is more like she's being gradually erased piece by piece. The verb drifts is quiet, slow, and almost ghostly. There's no violence here, which makes it all the more unsettling. It suggests inevitability and the force of a power that's too big to be defeated. The speaker's image floats without resistance into the news, into public perception, where she will be misrepresented, distorted, and reframed as someone to be feared. There's a strong implication that her face is now being conflated with media narratives, perhaps about terrorism, extremism, or migration, stories that circulate daily and fuel prejudice. It's not that the officer deliberately places her there, it's that she is passively absorbed into that cultural narrative. The newspaper stands for how the media contributes to and reinforces systemic suspicion. The fact that the newspaper is dated today is a reminder that this isn't dystopian fiction. It's happening now. It is, as the refrain insists, a sign of the times we live in. The poem concludes with a one-line stanza. It rustles as it lands. The final line stands alone, both visually and rhythmically. It's a fragment, just like the speaker's disintegrated identity. Ending on a single sentence emphasises quietness and finality. There's no resolution, no return to wholeness, just a soft sound and a lingering image. The verb rustles is gentle, almost imperceptible. It's onomatopoeic. You can hear the soft sound of the newspaper pages moving. But the quietness is unsettling. It reflects how insidious this kind of discrimination is. There's no shouting, no overt violence. It's the quiet turning of a page, and with that the quiet turning of suspicion into fact. The verb lands resonates with earlier mentions of flight. The traveller has just arrived, and now her image lands on the page of the newspaper. It's a layered metaphor. Her literal landing is shadowed by her metaphorical fall into public misrepresentation. The phrase also suggests that this media narrative, this false version of her, has found its place in the world. It has settled. It has been received. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments section below, and I'll do my best to answer them. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more videos on English language topics and exam techniques and English literature texts.